alphabetically by surname so the public can see who they are. Apologies have been received from councillors Bick, Bajan and Swift. Please advise if you know of any apologies from other councillors when I ask you to speak. Please say so. So are you present, Councillor Davis?
I am.
Hello, good to see you. Griffin? Yeah, Councillor Griffin.
Yes.
Councillor Lee,
Hello.
substituting for Councillor Beck, that's correct? Thank you. Councillor Porter and Pounds?
Present Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, present Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dikovic?
Divkovic, yeah, I'm here.
Apologies, I missed you there. And then Councillor Griffin and Glasper. Alternates, I believe.
Yes.
So. Yes, okay. Did I miss anybody? Oh, I apologize. Now your turn is coming. The Executive Councillor for Planning, Building Control and Infrastructure, Councillor Thornborough, is also present. Welcome to you.
Hello, thank you.
Now, the senior officer present for this meeting is Jonathan Dixon, Planning Policy Manager, who will be available to assist with officers' reports if required. And then Committee Manager Claire Tuncliffe and Meeting Producer Chris Connor are also permanently present throughout. Other officers will be joining us throughout the meeting. So thank you very much, everybody. Now, the meeting procedure: for each agenda item, the committee will receive a presentation from the relevant report author. Members will then to discuss the report and vote on the recommendations. Now, I know many of the councillors know the procedure, but this is for people attending, especially online for the first time and watching us on YouTube. Now, as chair, if the vote is split, I will have the casting vote. Following the vote of the committee, the executive councillor will be asked if they agree the decision. Now, I would like for nomination of vice chair just for this meeting. Anybody? Yes, Councillor. Everybody agree as vice chairs? Yes. Thank you very much. So the first agenda on item 1, apologies have been covered in introduction. Have I missed anybody? No? Thank you. Now, moving on to agenda item 2. Please could committee members declare if they have any declarations of interest and identify which agenda item their declaration relates to. Of course, Of course, you declare an interest at any time during the meeting. So, anybody to declare an interest? Okay. Now, agenda item 3, which are the minutes. So the minutes of 27th of June 2023, they're on page 3, have been submitted to this meeting for approval. If there are any concerns, please could members raise them now, otherwise they will both be approved as correct record. Does everybody agree with the minutes? Yes? Okay. Now, agenda item 4, public questions. I would like to welcome Anthony Carpenter to this meeting. Now, is Anthony Carpenter? Okay. As you're aware, Mr. Carpenter, you have 3 minutes to address the committee, followed by a further 2 minutes supplementary. The committee manager will ring a bell to notify you when your speaking time has finished. Okay, Mr. Camper, please begin.
Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, planning officers, and fellow residents even. The question basically is, please could Cambridge City Council work with the Combined Authorities Skills and Employment Committee to ask Cambridge's network of town planners in the private sector to organise a series of town planning workshops for residents, both for individual planning applications and also for engaging with the development planning process. There are no such courses or workshops on town planning in this year's Skills and Lifelong Learning programme for adult learners in and around Cambridge. I would be grateful if this could start a longer-term plan on how residents can learn about the functioning of town planning systems, if only to improve the quality of public scrutiny, while at the same time saving time and resources of residents and the council officers and councillors, as such knowledge would ensure comments are kept to whatever the law says are valid issues when commenting on planning applications. I should declare an interest in a way because both my brothers are qualified town planners, which is why I decided not to go down that route. I've also put on the desks of several councillors various either magazines and books that are related to citizenship and town and transport planning. This is because of a number of recent issues raised both locally and also at national party conferences, basically to, I think, reflect the importance of educating our city and making clear that there is material out there. In the case of the text I've given to Councillor Divkovic, at a recent community event that Councillor Davis organised, that book, The Beginner's Guide to Politics, aimed at 9 and 10-year-olds, was actually really popular in terms of people actually wanting to buy it. And I wondered if our local libraries, I know it's a county council issue, could ensure that books like that are stocked just to ensure that children are learning about citizenship. Looking at the GCSE citizenship studies, only 145 teenagers in Cambridgeshire took the GCSE in citizenship studies in 2022, which is a horrifically low number, even though the content of the syllabus is actually very good. But sadly, it misses out both town planning and healthcare. The only if I can call it, published guide I can find that's suitable for children and teenagers on how both local government and town planning works is the document that Councillor Griffin has got in his hands at the moment. And also, given the debate around whether Cambridge should get trams and things, several of you have got copies of Urban Transport magazine, which actually has been going since 1937. But the point being is that if we're going to get our city educated, we collectively have got to do a lot more. So I'll throw that into the mix. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Carpen. It's always really interesting to hear from you, and you have a vast knowledge of local history, which we really appreciate. We do have later on coming up in this committee the statement of community involvement, which sets out the range of measures that we do take to support and encourage participation in planning matters, and we regularly run events and webinars to help communities engage and understand the process. And we want to do more to the content that we have through the planning website, including videos explaining the planning process and also Section 106 and actually the whole range of complexities within what we do. And we also would very much like to encourage the private sector, like the town planning sector, to get involved in trying to help with information on planning applications and the local plan process. So we do engage with the private sector already, and we work with them to bring in apprentices into the planning service. But as you mentioned, there are various levels of local governance here in Cambridge and Cambridgeshire. And I will certainly speak to our representative on the Combined Authority Committee that you referred to, the Skills and Employment Committee. I'll talk to them. And I think the GCP also are involved in skills, so I'll mention it to them so we can see what we can do. But the libraries is dealt with by the County Council, but I will pass that suggestion on as well. But thank you once again for coming and highlighting all these important things.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thornborough. Now, Mr. Carpen, do you have any other supplementary items? Thank you.
I do. Thank you, Councillor Nesta. Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. I was in the Cambridgeshire collection just before I came here, and I found the Cambridge Local Plan Attitude Survey from May 1990. It was when I was at primary school. But it actually talks about a lot of the issues that actually the GCP are trying to deal with, and they actually ask questions about the city's attitude towards a light rail system, and that was back in 1990. It's not the same as the one from the Cambridge Connect, but I was wondering if through this meeting I could formally request that that document be digitised and published so that people can actually see and actually crunch the data, because the findings are actually very, very interesting. And I think also there is an opportunity for the new Year 12 students to look at that and do some external projects on the future of our city. I do think the local private sector town planning community has a duty, a moral duty, to help educate the rest of our city on how town planning functions, given how overburdened all of you are. But again, I think I'd just like to finish on looking at, when I was in Rock Road Library, there were very few children's books on citizenship and education, and I think the entire series from Usborne, not just on politics, but on ecology and economics and other issues, it would be great to see all of the children's libraries stocking that series, in particular in our economically less affluent parts of town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carpen. Councillor Thornborough, as the Executive Councillor, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Carpen. If you leave the document with me, I can see if that can be done. But I just want to say that our planning officers, I am not sure how overburdened they are. They are exceptionally hardworking and they achieve an awful lot. I think if they're overburdened, I'd hope they'd come and tell me. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carpen, for your time. Now we turn to agenda number item 5 on page 9, decision making for neighbourhood plans. Okay. Now I believe that the principal planning officer, Jenny Nutticombe, will present the report. Is that correct? Jenny, please begin.
You. So the report before you is asking for agreement for a scheme of delegation for decisions in relation to neighbourhood plans in Cambridge. Up to this point, all decisions taken on neighbourhood planning in relation to, as they progress through the process, have been agreed by the Executive Councillor. The first neighbourhood plan in Cambridge for South Newnham is now progressing through the plan making process, and therefore now seems to be an appropriate time to review and agree the decision making arrangements. National regulations require us to make decisions at key stages, and that those decisions are made either as soon as possible or in some instances within statutory time periods. So we're proposing a scheme of delegation that will hopefully kind of speed up the decision-making process and make it more efficient. And we've taken account of the lessons learned from South Cambridgeshire, where they have 8 adopted neighbourhood plans now. So as officers, we've had experience of taking neighbourhood plans all the way through the process. We've made sure that what we're proposing is in accordance with the City Council Constitution, and we're proposing sharing the responsibility between the Executive Councillor, the Joint Director for Planning and Economic Development, and officers, depending on the nature of the decision being made and the timescales for those decisions that we need to make. The decisions that we're proposing stay with the Executive Councillor, and therefore would potentially come to this meeting for a decision if we can make that work within the timescales that we have. Are the decisions in relation to designating a neighbourhood area or designating a neighbourhood forum, making comments on the submission version of the neighbourhood plan, and if there was recommendations from the examiner at that point that the neighbourhood plan should not proceed to referendum, then that decision on what to do next would be kept with the executive councillor. But the other decisions in relation to going from submitting comments on the pre-submission neighbourhood plan or taking account of what the examiner has said and moving forward to referendum and proposing at referendum, if it's successful, the making of the neighbourhood plan to full council would be delegated to the joint director, although with kind of in consultation with the executive councillor insofar as sharing those decisions with Councillor Thornborough as the member in that position at the moment, so that it's not kind of part of the decision-making process, but they're involved in knowing what the decision is that we're making.
Thank you very much for your report, Ms. Naticom. Now, we move on to members' questions. And could I ask that you raise your hand and then press your microphone when you're asked to speak, please? Yes, Councillor, I've got Councillor Pounds and Councillor Porter and Councillor Jikovic. So, and sorry, did you make a note? I keep, and the, apologies, and Councillor Lee. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a few questions. I've got an idea of somewhere in my area that this would work really well. I mean, I think it's a terrific idea to engage our residents more. So I'm thinking, I'm the member for Romsey, and Mill Road, which crosses from Romsey to Petersfield, is likely to be restricted soon and the traffic removed and it made much more pedestrianised. So what I wondered is this the kind of area that would benefit from a neighbourhood plan? So it crosses two wards. Is that going to work, or does it have to be restricted to wards? We have a community group called Mill Road for People who've been working together for quite a while now, drawing up ideas for the area on how to develop it. Biodiversity, you know, the sort of thing that people, accessibility, all those things that a shopping street can have if it hasn't got cars sloshing through it. Are they the sort of group, they have about 500, 600 members, but they are very much a community group. Are they the sort of group who would be able to undertake a neighbourhood plan? And then what sort of practical support would they get to be able to do this? That's okay, thank you.
So in the next item on the agenda, in the statement of community involvement, you'll hear that there is as the two councils, Cambridge City Council and South Cambridgeshire District Council, have a support offer in terms of neighbourhood planning. We've got a duty to support groups preparing neighbourhood plans. So it sets out the kind of nature of the support we would give. But yes, as part of that support, if there is a group or a group of people out there that would like to consider bringing forward a neighbourhood plan, then we're very happy to meet with them to figure out what they're thinking. Is a neighbourhood plan the right thing for them? Is there some other solution that might be a better option for them, depending on exactly what they're proposing? In Cambridge, if it's over more than one ward, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter in South Cambridgeshire either. It's in Cambridge, because there's no parish councils, you would need to set up a neighbourhood forum initially, and as part of setting that up, you've got the specific requirements in terms of the number of people, and that's got to be across a range of kind of members and residents and businesses, etc. go through a process and you submit an application, when we would take it through to, that as a neighbourhood forum that could then prepare a neighbourhood plan for whatever area is defined on a map.
Yes, Councillor Divikovic. Now I always confuse your name. Yes.
Okay, so my question is kind of, well, I wouldn't say three parts because they are three different questions, and you can stop me. But one of my questions is, so one of the main benefits of having having this delegation for neighbourhood planning is obviously its efficiency and being able to speed up the process. Obviously, there's going to be shared responsibility, and there are going to be more actors at play. So how will that make the decision-making more efficient in that respect? Because obviously, it's good that we have a more democratic process, but I'm just wondering, how does it actually speed up the process? Because that's one of the main benefits. Another question is on the neighbourhood forum and the neighbourhood area designation. Is having a neighbourhood forum a prerequisite to having a neighbourhood area designation? That's a question in terms of just understanding it better. And also, how do you elect members of the forum? How does that process work? Does a group of people just decide, oh, we want to make a forum, and then they elect themselves, and then they then form the forum? So, yeah, that concludes my questioning.
I'm going to go back through your list in the other
Yeah.
order. In terms of electing members to a forum, I don't know the exact process without looking it up, but there are specific regulations in terms of how it's formed, and it has to have a constitution, and therefore there will be guidance in terms of exactly what process they need to go through. So, yeah, we can come back to you if that's something you want to understand.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to know.
In terms of a neighbourhood forum and a neighbourhood area, you don't need one before the other. So you can, for the South Newnham neighbourhood plan that's going through the process, they submitted their application to become a forum and to designate a neighbourhood area at the same time. But you could do it like, here's our forum and here's our neighbourhood area in two separate applications, and we'd consider whichever one came first. And yeah, so they're not specifically tied together. But in terms of efficiency and more actors at play, it's to do with the timeframes, and kind of, for some of these decisions we've got 5 weeks to make a decision, and if we are able to agree that it just needs the joint director to sign off the decision, that's a quicker process for us than needing to bring it to members and going through the set process of agreeing it with the executive councillor and then agreeing it, kind of sharing it with the opposition and spokes through that process. So.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Porter, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your work on this, Jenny. I think from our side, we're broadly supportive of this. We welcome the inclusion of opposition spokes as well for some parts of the process, but we do understand for others where it's literally just signing something off to move to the next stage. I think we're generally comfortable with that. The one thing I would say, I know the intention is it will at some point cross this committee's papers, but technically at the moment it could go entirely through without coming through committee at any point. So I think what we would ask for is some reassurance that, because you do control the timescales to a certain extent, there will be at some point in the many weeks and months a point where it will go through. It needs to come to P&T at some point, planning and transport, because I'd welcome whether the exec council would agree to that. I think that is the intention anyway, but technically at the moment it could go through entirely on exec council and delegated to Stephen Kelly as head of planning, and then end up at full council, which obviously wouldn't give us the opportunity to maybe iron out any of the issues, whether that's party political issues. I would hope not for this kind of thing. But this committee is here for this kind of decision. So whilst I'm happy with the delegations, I understand the reasons, and I'm happy where, for example, Councillor Davis and myself would be consulted as opposition spokes. I would like a commitment that this would definitely come through this committee at some point, if only to make sure we're all aware of it happening. Because, you know, there are awards with multi-members, different parties, there are awards with only one party. So it's important we all know about it, because these are hopefully positive community developments. So I'd be grateful if either the officer or its councillor could just add some reassurance and put that into the paper that at some point it has to be considered by planning and transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. And then Councillor Lee, or would you like, apologies, Jenny, would you like to respond to that, or it's not necessary?
I was just going to say that, yes, we can try and do what we can to ensure that our decision will come through this meeting. There is some scope for, as you say, kind of the timings of certain stages where we're in control of it, and the regulations say that we need to kind of, like when we receive an application to designate or either the area or the forum, or when it's submitted to us, the regulations say we need to consult as soon as possible after receiving it. So we can see what we can do to like tie it up with these meetings, but we can't hold off kind of too long in that process. And any decisions made by the executive councillor and that have gone through the chair and spokes process would be reported to the next committee.
Yes, Councillor Porter?
I think my issue is more, it's just, for example, we've got the South Newham one, which I think both Councillor Davis and I were supportive of, but we don't actually have the full papers here. So we only have the decision reported. So I think for me, it's just that thing of, even if it's after the decision has been delegated, at some point before we get to that last stage where we're literally going to the making of it and putting it to full council, I would just like the papers to come through, if you see what I mean. Because at the moment, if you read the South Newham one, that's great, but actually the councillors who weren't part of that decision, which is basically the two opposition spokes and Councillor Thornburg, haven't seen any of that. So I think that's what I'm asking for, as I understand about the timescales, but I would not want it to get to full council and then someone talk to someone on this committee and go, oh no, we never saw that. So I think that's what I'm asking, is it doesn't necessarily have to fit with the exact timescales, but at some point the full documents need to come to this committee so that we're aware of it and we can, you know, we are quite new to this in the city, I think. South Cams are more experienced. So I hope it would be a benefit for officers to have our input on this committee. So I think, would that be something that would be, I'm hoping Councillor Davis agrees with me on that as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Would you like to reply, Jenny? Are you okay? We'll give you the response. Yes. Okay.
I think the issue is I don't think we're far away on this at all. I think generally, of course, we would aim to do that. I think the issue Jenny's trying to balance is the reason they have these timelines and so on is the aim is that it's the pushing the council responsibility on processing through and getting these plans adopted. So equally, there's a responsibility on us not to delay things with our own processes. So we can certainly look at that. I'm happy to look at that, and I suspect it will always be able to be done, but we just need to be aware that we have a responsibility to get these plans through their processes. So.
Thank you, John. Yes.
We do have the ability to note decisions previously taken. So I think we could do that. We could bring that. But the other thing is that these don't normally happen very quickly, but they tend to be deal with deadlines. So you've got 5 years to do something, and it's like 4 years, 12 months before it's done. But if we can encourage, if this does start happening in Cambridge, it would be great to ask submissions to align with scrutiny. But if not, they can certainly come to the decision, you know, as note of records of decisions.
Thank you. Now, I noticed that Councillor Davis has raised her hand in relation. Is your question in relation to this issue or separate? Okay. All right. So, Councillor Lee, then we'll go ahead with your question.
Thanks. Yeah, we're broadly supportive of this. We would like some kind of commitment that ward councillors would be involved in any kind of proposals, especially when those proposals pertain to their own wards. And also, a separate question that I have is, while I welcome the kind of engagement with the community, how do we plan to ensure that access and education about these schemes to our most disadvantaged communities and wards, so that neighbourhood plans don't become a vehicle to just maintain pockets of privilege in Cambridge against those with fewer resources, both in time and money? And what will be in place to make sure that people who aren't on board with these neighbourhood plans, either they don't know about them, they are apathetic, or outright dissenting against them, what do we have in place to ensure that they're not overridden by a passionate but vocal minority?
So in terms of ward councillors, at the stages of us drafting comments on pre-submission versions of the neighbourhood plan or submission versions of the neighbourhood plan, we would notify the ward councillor that we are preparing a response. I just didn't include them in the report because they're not part of the decision-making process, but they are our internal list of things that we would do to notify. In terms of your second question, in terms of making people aware of what's going on, do you mean in areas that haven't got a neighbourhood plan happening, or do you mean both those areas and other areas?
What I mean, I suppose, is that I can see these kind of schemes becoming dominated by people with the time and money to actually invest in pushing for these, rather than necessarily the kind of places that might actually need it. So how do we ensure that this is democratised across all areas of Cambridge to people with the fewest access to the kind of time and money that would be required to get such a movement going?
So wherever a neighbourhood plan comes forward, there would need to be a neighbourhood forum set up. So you would need to have a body of people that are willing to kind of group together and commit to working on it. It's not something that we can force people to kind of take forward a neighbourhood plan. So, and the experience of groups doing neighbourhood plans is it takes a lot of effort and commitment and volunteer time. So you would need to find enough people that are committed to making the process come forward to make it happen. So understanding what you're saying about not wanting kind of disadvantaged areas to miss out, you would need a group of people in the local community to make it happen. And we can through our commitment to support as much as we can, but you need that because these are community-led kind of planning documents.
So will there be kind of like online resources and information packs, etc., for people who request them?
So there's already a toolkit for neighbourhood plans on our website, and the councils, as part of the kind of liaison with like residents associations and parish councils, kind of put out there that there is neighbourhood planning and that kind of stuff. So we try and highlight to people that these exist if they want to take it up.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, did you have another question? Just Councillor Davis is waiting. That if you want to go back. Okay. All right, Councillor Davis, go ahead.
Thank you. As John will know, because I've asked questions about this before. I am really, really keen to see more neighbourhood planning happening in the city. I think it's an incredibly important tool for helping people feel like they have ownership and investment in their place. So I am very supportive of whatever we can do to increase the efficiency of getting plans through in the city. And if this does that, then great. And I assume that if we discover that the process has some bits that we're not quite comfortable with, we just revisit the process. We have this meeting again and we redesign it. So I'm very positive about what's going on. In terms of what Councillor Lee was just saying about the possibility of inequalities being in our communities being replicated through the plan process, Professor Gavin Parkin at Reading University has done a huge amount of work looking at this, and you're very right to identify the problem. But as we've kind of thrashed out during this debate, neighbourhood plan making is very regulated, just the same as local plan making is very regulated. So we will need to be creative as ward councillors in trying to foster people's understanding of why they might want to make a plan and get them signed up for it, because it is a community activity. You know, I hope everybody around the table shares my enthusiasm for getting these things off the ground, because I think we've seen what they've done in South Cambs in terms of getting villages engaged with what's happening, and I'd really like to see some of that happening in our neighbourhoods too. So thank you for the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Thornborough?
I would just like to thank Councillor Davis for those comments, and I completely agree. If there are any ward councillors who know of residents who are interested, and it doesn't have to be a big area, it could even be a street, I would do whatever I can to assist to help this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny, did you want to say something else? Okay, John?
Only that, as Jenny alluded to, the toolkit we have on our website, it is a good resource, providing lots of guidance all the way through the process, but also we are seeking now to update the toolkit. And as part of that, we'll be looking to perhaps have a new launch of it. Perhaps, you know, we can do awareness with the resident associations in our parishes and so on to say we're updating the toolkit. Might even be able to do some short videos as well. So we are very much wanting to promote the work we do in providing assistance. So hopefully that will help spread the word to all communities.
Thank you very much, John. Now, are there any more questions before we move to vote? No? So the recommendation on page 10 of the agenda pack. Now, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, do count. Yeah. Unanimous. Does the Executive Councillor agree with the recommendation?
I do, and I just want to thank the officers for all their hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, for your presentation. And this is very welcoming, actually. It's lovely. Now, we now turn to agenda item 6, which is a statement of community involvement. For this item, we are joined by Principal Planning Officer Terry De Souza and Senior Planning Officer Andrew, I apologize, how do you pronounce your name? Tyrer, who is online. Is that correct or not?
We've actually got Mr. D'Souza has been promoted. He's now one of our team leaders, so we've missed that one. And we've got Kieran Davies, one of our planning officers, online as well. So a slight change of staff.
Oh, no, no worries. And congratulations for your promotion. Now, may I ask who we have online? Oh, it's Kieran Davies. Oh, okay. So so Terry, I believe you will be presenting the report, correct? Thank you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your kind words, and good evening, everybody. Before the committee tonight is the draft statement of community involvement, which sets out the council's approach to community engagement on planning matters. This is a joint document with South Cambridgeshire District Council, and is effectively an update to the Statement of Community Involvement that was adopted by this council in 2019. We are legally required to update this document every 5 years. And as part of this work, we've decided to really pick up on the new ways of engagement that we've been undertaking over those last 5 years. Really learning some of the lessons from the engagement we did on the local plan and the North East Cambridge Area Action Plan during COVID and all of those restrictions, as well as really emphasising the need for developers to engage with our communities really early on in the planning process. We know that in order to achieve the best outcomes, the best planning outcomes from development, early developer engagement is absolutely essential in that. Now, while we can't mandate them to do that, we are really encouraging them to do so, and are already seeing that across the city already, in places like Hartree and other developments as well. So, in short, we're seeking authority this evening to prepare and consult on the draft Statement of Community Involvement, where that will be consulted on for 6 weeks. Before it will be, comments will be reviewed, and then a finalised version will be brought back to this committee early next year. Just to briefly run you through the document itself. So the first section really sets out our aims of engagement as two local councils, and what planning is and why it's really important that local people engage in the planning process, whether that's planning policy, and how we shape development over the next 15 to 20 years, or planning applications that affect their kind of day-to-day lives. The second section highlights why engagement achieves the best outcomes, and also some of the examples of existing ways that people can engage through our local area forums, as an example. And then the third section is around planning policy, so our area of expertise in the room at the moment, and how we generally go above the necessary when it comes to engagement on planning policy. Whilst government regulations say we have to consult for 4 or 6 weeks, you've got to make a copy available in the library, etc. We almost always do more than that, and I think it's been widely recognised locally and nationally that we do a fairly effective job with that, whether it's youth engagement, online videos, interactive webinars, and even direct engagement door-to-door with our Gypsy and Traveller communities as well. I'd like to think that we do a fairly good job from that front. The fourth section of documents around planning applications, and it sets out how people can get involved in that process, and it explains what the planning application process is, from pre-application, decision-making through to appeals. And again, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's about how we try and get encourage developers as much as we can to engage with our communities really early on. Things like urban rooms, youth engagement, which is something that the councils are working with at the moment, only at Shirley Primary School a few months ago. But also the importance of feedback loops within that process. I think it's very easy for developers to just receive information, but yet that information isn't then fed back to community to explain how their comments have been taken on board. So we're trying to set that out in the update to this document. There is a new section in this part around national infrastructure planning. There are a number of schemes that either have been consented or are going through that process at the moment in this area. And so therefore, whilst those that doesn't necessarily sit with either this council or South Cambridgeshire District Council in terms of decision making, people can still engage in those processes in meaningful ways. So we've set that out as to how people can do that. The fifth section is around section 106 and how at times people are able to directly or indirectly through ward members help determine where monies go in terms of which projects or specifically design related issues, for example, children's playgrounds and play areas. Section 6, as Jenny mentioned earlier, is about neighbourhood planning and the support that we offer. And then section 7 is around monitoring and how we, for example, monitor the number of representations we receive on local plan and other policy consultations. So, more than happy to answer any questions or queries that the committee have. I just want to say that in short, the kind of key changes that we've made to this document from the previous version are set out in paragraph 3.4 of the report at a fairly high level, but I'm hoping that I've explained that a little bit more in my presentation just now. Just as a footnote to the report, just to say that this document did go to the South Cambridgeshire District Council Cabinet meeting this morning, and was approved as per the exact same recommendations as in front of the panel tonight, the committee tonight. That was approved for public consultation, and we'll be seeking to undertake that consultation, obviously subject to decision this evening, around mid-October for 6 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. Now we move on to members' questions. As to what I asked again to raise your hand and then press your microphone when you are ready to speak. So we have Councillor Porter and Councillor Davis. And then Terry, before I move on to the councillors asking you questions, would you like to answer one by one or a few questions all in one?
Ideally one by one, because I will forget.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so Councillor Porter, please go ahead.
Again, thank you very much. I think generally supportive of this. A couple of comments. I think section 4 about engaging pre-app is really important. And I think it might be we almost need a category of pre-app, because some of the more successful ones are where developers haven't even got anywhere near pre-app and they've already gone out and letter drops and had these events. So I'd welcome that being strengthened, because actually by the time they get to pre-application stage, they've normally drawn up quite a substantial part of the plans. And actually, I think some of the more successful ones that I've noticed recently in the city are where, before that stage, the developers are really kind of upfront saying, hang on, this is what we're planning, what do you think? Because I think anyone who sits on planning committee knows the nearer you get to a submission, the harder it gets to change the big things. So it is in there, but almost it's before pre-app where we've had, I think, some notable successes. I think you've referenced Devonshire and various people, but they were kind of way ahead of even coming near pre-application stage. The second one, paragraph 3.30 and 3.1, that is the only reference to not being online. So, we have got some amazing online tools, and that's fantastic, and I totally appreciate that. But I really think we need to strengthen references to not being online. I mean, certainly I know in my ward I have several residents who handwrite and give it to me or post it to the Guildhall. And that, that is because some people aren't comfortable online or the planning portal doesn't work for them. For a lot of people who haven't grown up, including myself at times, with digital usage, some of those things, I just would really like that to be more obvious in the document, because it worries me that when you flick through, it's mostly about our digital offer. And then there's just these very bits about where you can write to us. So again, I'd welcome a little bit more of that being threaded through the document, just so we're reiterating that all the time. Every time we mention digital, we should say, by the way, here's another option if you can't. Paragraph 4.9 talks about pre-application advice. When I last went on our website, it appears we now charge for that. The 15-minute free thing, I couldn't find it. So I'm not entirely sure where we made that decision. I don't remember it coming through here. It certainly says as of the 4th of September, it is now you have to pay. So again, could we, if that is the case, we need to say it in this document. If it isn't the case, can we correct it? Because I don't remember that being in the documents we agreed last year. And I'm pleased to see Councillor Thorburn nod your head. So let's just look at that, because certainly at the moment, that wasn't what I found when I went on for a resident recently. And finally, with my planning geek head on, in Appendix 5, we list some of the statutory and non-statutory consultees. I would quite like us to add more in there, just because I know when we sit on planning committee, you expect to see the lead local flood authority. I've got loads: tree officer, drainage, conservation, heritage, access officer, CAM cycle, waste service, highways, urban design, environmental health. Not that every one of those is relevant to every application, but I just think if you're a member of the public reading through, it's quite useful to kind of see the kind of people we might be talking to. Because obviously you can say the county and the city, but we have loads of amazing officers within that who do all kinds of different things. And I know from when you look at particularly a major application, but even a minor, hopefully Councillor Thornbury will agree, you do tend to go and look at these statutory and non-statutory consultees. So I just wonder if you might consider adding some more in, because I know everyone doesn't need too much information, but actually having those in there and going, oh, well, this will be an environmental health thing that I could query with officers if I'm not happy about the noise, or I think that would just be useful to know. So I'm very supportive of this document, but I hope those will be seen as improvements, perhaps. Thank you.
Terry, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions. To go in order, regarding the need to do pre-app, absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more. More than happy to look at the wording on that. I don't think that'd be a problem at all. The bit about 3.30 and 3.31 about people not being online. and making it more obvious. Again, we can look at the wording on that, absolutely. I think from the experience that we've had, people have found, and I'm using this quite broadly now when I say this, people have found that going online is actually relatively convenient, bearing in mind people's generally busy lives these days, and the fact that they can still engage in planning from the comfort of their own home at a time that suits them. We also know that the government is really keen to digitise the planning system as much as possible, and actually we are doing specific projects looking at how we can try and improve that digital offer. But nevertheless, we are still really, really mindful that not everybody either has access to the internet or is able to use a computer, even if it was there in front of them. So, you know, we have tried in the SCI to make it clear that we will still try and do as much as we can when it comes to face-to-face events, as I mentioned in my presentation, you know, going to Gypsy and Traveller sites and engaging them directly on local issues that affect them regarding the local plan. But no, absolutely happy to, again, look at the wording on that and making it more obvious in the document. Regarding the pre-application charge, so I've looked into this. Effectively, we still offer 15 minutes free advice for householders and small business queries. What did happen on the 4th of September was that the pre-application level 1 advice was temporarily withdrawn for charities, and that was in agreement with lead members. Again, the experience that officers were seeing was that actually they were almost asking for more than what was being offered within that level 1 of support. So that is currently being reviewed. It's not saying it's been taken away completely. It's being paused and being reviewed to see how that offer could be delivered in a way that actually can be resourced properly, as well as making sure that obviously charities can get the service that they need. But yeah, generally speaking, the 15-minute free offer still is in place, so that's fine. And regarding Appendix 5s and consultees, so you'll see within the non-statutory consultees, it does say internal council service areas and probably gives only a couple of examples. Again, we can add more, and I think that's absolutely fine to do that. But I think my caveat would be that it would probably say where relevant, because I don't think our colleagues in other services would appreciate being consulted on every application if they don't need to. And yes, you are absolutely correct that the lead local flood authority should be a consultee in Appendix 5 as well. So we will make sure that we add that. But thank you for flagging that.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thank you. Does it help by telling you I've got 5 points? Okay. So the first one is building on this point about digital literacy and accessibility. And I mentioned to you at the opposition councillor briefing, we should also pay attention to the fact that 16% of the English population are functionally illiterate, and the proportion may be different in Cambridge because of the kind of people who are here, but we should be very cognizant of the fact that there are people who don't just struggle with technology, they actually struggle with language. And this is me making another plea for de-jargonising wherever possible. I ran the introduction to this statement through a language complexity engine and it scored at the more complex end. If that's the outcome we get for the introduction, which is supposed to be encouraging people to engage with this area of activity, that's not a great start. And also, when we're thinking about digital, I know many of my residents would be working off phones and not off laptops, and I, through bitter experience, would never now try and engage with the planning portal on a phone. So I don't know if there's a commitment we can make there to making digital available at the simplest possible level, wherever that is. The second thing is paragraph 4.7. Great that we've had people engaging in those numbers at Hartree and with Devonshire Gardens. However, I would implore us to be aware that numbers are not the product of this activity. High quality engagement from our residents is what we're looking for. And so if this just becomes a kind of tick box exercise where we can say that 300 people turned up to this and 400 people turned up to that. That's kind of missing the point. So I don't know if there are qualitative measures that we can use as well, but I think that's important. Various geographical fora that have been set up. I am very aware, because of the location of Queen Edith's, proximity to the biomedical campus and the frenzy of activity going on there, that we don't have such a forum. And I think it might be helpful to be a bit more explicit about how those things get created, what the threshold is for triggering the creation of one of those bodies, if we feel that's a useful direction to go in. And of course, depending on what happens with area committees, they may be very important. In 4.33 about compliance, there's at least 2 councillors around this table who have invested quite a lot of time in the last little while wrestling with compliance issues, and I wouldn't want to speak for the other councillor, but my experience is that because everything now goes through the portal, it's a bit of a black box. And as that's my casework, as those are issues that residents have raised with me to ask me to advocate for on their behalf, it's a bit unnerving to just put a request in and then, yes, get a acknowledgement of the request, but then a long period potentially before I hear anything back, while I'm having my residents going, have you done anything? What's the answer? What's the hold up? So I don't know if there's something there that you can put in by way of an assurance about service level or something, but something to make that a bit more transparent. And then the section 106 priorities in 5.3. I wonder if there's anything we can do with the language there, because, you know, the idea that as part of the consideration, people may give their views, these will be considered in line with previously identified projects and the priorities of both councils. The worst thing we can possibly do, in my opinion, is invite people to provide input and then kind of dismiss it because there's some other agenda running that wasn't visible. So I think if we're going to include that, we have to really mean it.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Terry? No, you're taking notes still, so.
Sorry, there we go. Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Okay, so on your point around digital, absolutely around de-jargoning documents, it is something that we have tried incredibly hard to do and continue challenge ourselves to do that. Planning is a very technical area, and we have such a wide audience when it comes to planning documents, from the development industry, statutory consultees, through to the person on the street who has never engaged in the process at all previously. And so to try and strike that balance is something that we are always trying to do through our work. I was really interested to hear about the fact that you ran the introduction to this document through a machine reader, and it told you kind of the reading age sort of ability. We can definitely look at simplifying the introduction if that would help. But again, you know, if there are parts of the document that people, you know, if we get responses and people are, you know, saying that actually this just isn't clear, we just don't understand how this works, or, you know, those are the type of information we can really take on board as we look to finalise this document, because it is still at draft stage. Appreciate the point as well about people use the internet a lot more on their phones now than previously, rather than laptops. I do appreciate that the whole planning portal, looking at applications, I can't speak for that side of planning at the moment, I'm afraid. So, but I do know that we are looking at redesigning the website for the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, and that is a key kind of output, is to make sure that it is completely readable on tablets and devices as much as around laptops. And obviously with the digital local plan and the evidence-based documents that we do, we really break them down into smaller files, and we try and make sure that they're easy to navigate on those smaller devices as well. But no, I do appreciate your point around planning applications. Around section, I think it was 4.7, around high quality engagement. One of the things we are looking to do, and we have actually started doing this already, is putting videos online on our website, actually explaining, what planning is, how people can get involved, and also what is a material consideration when it comes to planning. I think it's very easy sometimes for people to kind of, sort of brain dump a little bit and say, well, it's everything. But, I think everyone around this table knows actually there are very defined limits as to what's planning, what's building control, maybe what's the county council. So that's definitely something that we can look to further enhance as we upgrade the website and move that forward. Around the area forums, no, I do absolutely appreciate that there isn't a Southern Area Forum at the moment, and I spoke with you the other day about that. The area forums is definitely something that's on our radar at the moment. We've had some feedback from the communities team about how well they think that the forums are working, and it's something that Stephen Kelly is picking up corporately at the moment. But as part of that, I think there will be a bit of a consideration as to how these forums are established, and actually whether at the moment the kind of geographic nature of them is actually working or not, and whether there's a way to kind of I don't know, make them, I suppose, make them work better as we move forward. But yeah, like I said, it's something that we are picking up at the moment at a corporate level. Compliance, I'm afraid I can't really give you a direct answer on compliance, although we can definitely follow that up with colleagues in development management on that. In terms of what the current kind of target times are and whether we're achieving those on compliance. And then around section 106 and language, absolutely I agree that, if it's in there, we have to mean it. And essentially the statement of community involvement it's a statement of our intent. It sets out what we will do in terms of engagement. And I think the City Council does have a track record of engaging with communities on Section 106 agreements. I know from my own personal experience living in Petersfield, where I think there was some money's available to upgrade one of the local children's play areas. That was well publicised, and people were able to vote for the scheme that they wanted to see actually being delivered there. So I think there is a bit of a track record. That obviously doesn't sit with planning, that sits with Streets and Open Spaces or the communities team. But yeah, people can engage in that way. They can also engage through their local ward members, where there's that kind of more generic Section 106 money made available that doesn't go to a specific area or to a specific scheme, like a specific playground. And there's also sort of community groups and sports groups as well that can also apply and bid for money as well through Section 106. Obviously, again, communities are part of those organisations as well. I hope that answered almost all of your questions, but please do come back to me if they haven't.
Thank you very much, Terry. Yes, Councillor Davis?
Just to say on the Section 106 thing, I am aware of good practice, excellent practice in the city, but in my own ward, I can point you to an example where Section 106 money was spent in Trumpington at the Clay Farm site, which is a very nice facility. But if you talk to anybody in Queen Edith, the difficulties of getting there by bike, by public transport, would mean that that's simply not relevant to us. And I think if one of the ways you get people involved with the planning system is by encouraging them to think very local. And when they see a development in their ward, in their area, which is having an impact, but the benefit from that is being spent in a place they won't go to, that's frustrating. That's the kind of example I'm thinking about whether we can address.
Thank you. I suppose the other side of that is people do have the opportunity to comment on planning applications before a Section 106 has been agreed. So obviously through the SCI, what we're trying to do is encourage people to engage in the planning process when either at the pre-app stage or at the actual formal consultation period. And typically what you tend to see is people they might say there's an infrastructure deficiency in our area, and actually this development is only going to make that situation worse, and it needs to contribute to, expanding the primary school. further facilities at the library, doctor's surgery, etc. All of those comments are obviously taken on board by the case officer. They engage with the relevant, authority or body on those issues, and then that then helps inform the Section 106 heads of terms and how that's then drafted. So that by the time actually the monies are actually then available to either spend or implement, it's actually, there has been an opportunity already for communities to actually comment on the planning application and to actually, highlight where those deficiencies are in their local areas to hopefully mean that those monies will be spent locally to mitigate the impacts of the development. But I'm judging by your face that isn't necessarily always the case, but I'll let you comment on that.
Thank
No
you, Terry.
comment.
Thank you, Terry. Now, Councillor Griffin, you also had a question.
Thank you, Chair. So when we think about resident engagement with planning, often when it actually is some sort of negotiate, if somebody's having a development in their area or next to their house or something like that, there's also some sort of often some sort of back and forth, right? Concerns being addressed. And these often end up in conditions on a planning application. And what I find, what I've seen, what I've witnessed is that, frustration with residents by not having these conditions enforced. Some of these conditions can't be enforced. So when the compliance people actually look at them, they say, well, that's written in such a way that we can't legally enforce that. Or another thing is that the developers just completely ignore the conditions. And what happens here is the residents are engaged, right? They become involved, and then afterwards they become extremely cynical about the whole process. So something needs to be done to fix that problem of, first of all, writing conditions that can't be enforced, and then making sure that the conditions are actually enforced. And this is, this is echoing some of the comments of Councillor Davies. It's not so, the timing of that and the length of time it takes is an issue, but it's also an issue that they're just not being enforced at all.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Griffin. I'm definitely not a compliance officer, but I know that the NPPF, so the National Planning Policy Framework, makes it clear that planning conditions can only be applied, and there are 6 key tests. So it's necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development, which is going to be permitted, enforceable, precise, and reasonable. So if there's a planning condition in place, then it's there for a reason and it can be enforced. I guess maybe, perhaps in certain circumstances, I don't know, I'm second guessing. Perhaps there are instances where the conditions are, I don't know, close to being met, but not fully. I don't know. I'm not a compliance officer, but I think it's definitely something that we can look into and talk to our compliance officers to understand that issue a bit more. But in terms of what national policy requires, those are the key. Those are the key 6 key tests, and every local authority has to, abide by those tests.
Certainly had situations where, conditions were not complied with, and the compliance people said they couldn't enforce them because of the way they were written. So there is a disconnect there, and I've seen this happen. And again, I want to emphasize that it makes residents extremely cynical about the entire planning process.
Councillor Thornborough, you have a comment to make as well.
I know that the compliance team have had a review, and quite recently, and it's the problems that you've outlined, is we have known that that has happened. And I hope that in the case that you're talking about, it might have been planning application from a while back, but we are absolutely aware that if we have a condition, it has to be enforceable. So we've had a review of the wording of the conditions and actually working with the compliance officer to ensure that if the conditions are used, that they are happy that it can be enforced. So we were aware of it. So I'm not sure about that, the circumstances that you're talking about, when that was actually issued and whether it's before the recent review of compliance.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions for Terry? No? Okay, so thank you very much, Terry. So now we will now go to vote. The recommendations are on page 27 of the agenda pack. So if you need to go to the agenda pack, I'll just give you a minute. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. And is the Executive Councillor minded to agree the recommendation?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry and Kieran, for joining us. And now, before we turn to agenda item 7, do people want a 5-minute comfort break, or are you okay to keep going? So now item 7 is in page 109, and response to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, consultation on plan-making reforms implementation. So for this item, the Planning Policy Manager will present this item. So John, please begin.
Members may recall that back in the spring, we came, I think it was this committee, and agreed a response to some significant changes proposed to the planning system alongside the Levelling Up Bill, which is still making its way through Parliament at the moment. So this is really a follow-up consultation by the government on the more specifics of how their new plan-making system would work. So back in the spring, they proposed that plan-making could be done within a 30-month period, and asked views on that. But this now really sets out how they would propose that could be done. The overall aim of their proposals really is to increase the level of adoption of local plans across the country. They want to encourage take-up by almost giving more weight through the Levelling Up Bill to the importance to plans. They want to increase the value of them, so making clear that if you have an adopted plan, it would mean you have a 5-year land supply in place for a 5-year period. And they also want to make changes to make adopting plan easier. How this plan-making process would now work is, in the lead up to your new 30-month plan-making period, you would undertake informal consultation with a range of stakeholders seeking to shape what that vision for your plan might look like, and using some of the, in our case, innovative methods we talked about through the SCI a moment ago. You would then really start the clock, and within that 30-month period, you would undertake 2 consultations, one on, say, a draft of what your objectives, your plan is, and your vision, and the options available to meet that vision. And then the second formal consultation would be on a draft plan itself. Along the way to that, there would be a series of 3 gateway procedures where your plan would effectively be tested to see if it's going in the right direction, whether it's meeting basic tests against regulations and so on. With the aim that having undertaken those consultations and those gateways, your plan gets to your submission stage in a very good state. And there would then be an examination, but this examination will be restricted to generally a 6-month period. That's very different to our experience of examinations, because our last examination, you may recall, took 4 years. So this is quite a change of process. The government is really clear though, whilst obviously much of this is about speeding up, they also really try to emphasise the importance of public consultation along the way. There's a lot in here about how plans can take advantage of new digital tools. Can we use templates, mechanisms of making information much more accessible? Much of which we're already doing very much in this area. So as part of the Greater Cambridge Local Plan, you'll have seen we've done our own websites, consultation methods. We're taking part in a government project where they've given us funding to explore how we can process consultation information more efficiently. So as we are a very active plan maker, much of these reforms would look very positive, enabling us to potentially adopt plans more quickly and efficiently, whilst potentially continuing to engage effectively with our communities. I guess some of the concerns were reflected in the response we're proposing to you, though, is that in many areas the proposals need much more clarity. If clarity isn't delivered through detail in regulation, for example, issues like this tend to be then sorted out in the courts. So these issues need to be clear in the system that they propose. Also, I think we have some concerns about whether in all cases it will be possible to achieve the 30-month period. We are very aware of events that can be unexpected and can hold up your plan making process. Water to us has been a real challenge recently, for example. Also, resources is really important, and I think the government are really aware of the importance of resourcing planning departments at the moment. They've recently run some bidding rounds for additional funding to authorities to address planning backlogs, for example. So I think on the whole, there's a lot of positives in here, but I hope we've put together for your recommendation a constructive response, but one which highlights areas that still need work if this system is to do all the things the government want to achieve with it. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, John. And then before we move into the question, would you like them one by one, or
I'm flexible.
You're flexible, okay. So we'll take a few, maybe 2 or 3 at a time. So does anybody have any questions? Please raise your hand. Okay, so Councillor Porter, Councillor Davis, anybody else? Okay, so we'll take the 2, and then since you said that you can take it, then let's.
Thank you very much. I've got a few. Just comments. I mean, again, I have the concern, I share concerns John's raised. I think there's some questions where, again, we have focused on our digital, which is great because we are leading in that. But again, I think we need to work back in references to people who aren't digital. So that particularly would be questions 8, 9, 28 and 43, particularly in the accessibility one. It is great to have pro forma, to have all this digital stuff, but we have to push back and just say you can't move everything online because it's not fair on the residents who can't engage, as Councillor Davis said as well. Secondly, and I think John has already mentioned, question 6 about this 30 months deadline. In principle, yes, but as you say, stuff happens. So, for example, a development control order outside our control, as is happening for our own local plan, and it's quite right that it needs democratic scrutiny. A judicial review, as John says, these can be sorted out in the courts. Certainly the first time we're going through this, I would anticipate people challenging things. So I think we need to raise in this what happens if you can't meet the 30-month thing. Or what if we have some elections, a general election, a few local elections, that again, you've got purdah, everything will stop. And my concern is, what if it ends up like land supply? What if we get to 30 months and a day and we don't have a plan in place? Is it a free-for-all then? As it is if you don't have land supply, is it developers can then start saying, well, you haven't got a plan? So I would quite like that to go back in our responses, because I think that's so important. And I think particularly for the first time for all of us. I mean, we're, I think, a very good local planning authority. We're ahead of many. But, as we know at the moment, a DCO can stop it. So, and also, are the government going to put financial penalties if we don't hit 30 months? So I really would like a little bit of strengthening question 6. Picking up again what John said, question 21 and 30 relate to funding. I think absolutely the government need to fund this. You know, our planning officers are working madly busy. You know, we know it's an under-resourced area. We know there's recruitment problems across the whole country. We're lucky to have some excellent officers. But if they want to push through an accelerated local plan, where is that money going to come from? So again, I would really like those responses for questions 21 and 30 to be more robust. You know, we've got a lot of prior approvals. We've had another out-of-cycle consultation on changes to permitted development and prior approvals. Again, they cost us money because often they come in, there's not a fee or it's a very low fee, but the officers have to do all the work. So, you know, we are not going to be rolling in money. You know, the government needs to stump up for us and for other authorities. And finally, please no, question 22, where it talks about the 3-week turnaround. Again, I would like us to push back on that because, you know, if it needs to go through scrutiny, that automatically means it can't. We don't have a committee every 3 weeks. And I think, and again, if you're in election, PERDA or general election, all those kind of things that stop things, I would just like us to make sure that we can scrutinise this and that residents get the right to do it and they're not sort of stopped by a process outside our control. And also, I just wanted question 39, community land auctions, something that's just come through at the Dem Party conference is something we're supportive of. I just wondered why we'd left question 39 blank. But thank you. Those are my questions. And again, I can email them to officers if it's helpful afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor Porras. So, Councillor Davies, your questions?
Yeah, I was going to pick up on one of Councillor Porras' points, which is about the funding side of this. I think I would be punchier than she has been about it. John explained in his introduction that one of the reasons the government is trying to move this through is because of recalcitrant local planning authorities who are not developing and adopting local plans. We are not in that position. We have, I think it's fair to say, had a pretty exceptional performance in getting plans through and in our delivery as well. And for those reasons, I think we should be in a really strong position to advocate for funding for the money that this is going to cost us. There is no way we should be supine in the face of government putting this requirement on us and asking us to cover the costs. In the answer to question 21, you've said any additional costs have potential to impact on local planning authority ability to fund plan making and delivery. If not funded directly by government, costs would need to be proportionate. I think I would absolutely want it to say additional costs have the potential to impact negatively on local planning authorities, and they must be funded by government because we haven't got any money to do it ourselves. I can't understand why we would be anything less than entirely forceful on that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies.
I think many of these, we can obviously make changes subject to the views of the lead member. In terms of being too focused on digital, I think we did emphasise in some of the questions, but if there are other questions where we could have added more emphasis on the need to make sure planning is accessible to everybody, then that's something we could address in the final response. The 30-month period. I mean, some of these questions to me are, I only know what's written in the paper, but in terms of the enforcement of that 30 months, I think the intention is that timeline will be set out in the NPPF rather than in regulation. So I think by doing that, they're acknowledging that it's an aim, but it's not something that will be enforced in a way that you have failed to meet that target. You have. So in terms of your question about financial penalties, I'm not seeing anything about that either. I guess the penalty of not having one is that you would fall into, at the moment, the tilted balance regarding 5-year supply and so on. But partly that's their aim of making sure they put a system together where they consider you can do a plan in 5 years. But that is a risk, that is a central part of it. And there are going to be circumstances that occasionally affect. So that's a difficult one to answer. terms of the funding, yes, I guess that's, I mean, perhaps the lead member would like to advise if they'd like to add further emphasis on that, but yes, plan making is expensive. It is an investment in the area, and the evidence requirements are expensive. Again, there's a lot in here about making evidence more proportionate. Well, we'll need to see the outcome of that. But yes, plan making does become a cost. It's challenging. It's challenging to find the right skills. So that is something we can mention if the lead member wishes to emphasise that further. Community land. Oh, sorry, the 3-week turnaround. Yes, I think we did add in points that there are certain cases where there are processes set out that would be challenging. The one I think we referenced as well with parish councils who will want to respond, and often, some of our consultations can be challenging for them, even when we go sort of 6-8 weeks. So I think we emphasise that if the request is to add more to that emphasis, then we could pick that up. Community land auctions. I think we felt that the proposal seems so early. It might be one to see where the pilots end up with that process. So there's not too much to comment other than seeing where that goes. And the main emphasis here was to comment on the issues that are most relevant to us at the moment on the plan making. And then Councillor Davies' points being punchier on the funding, if the lead member would like us to do so. But yes, I obviously, as I mentioned, it is challenging. And again on question 21, yes, if the lead member feels not been punchy enough, happy to address that, but happy to be advised. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I'm happy to pick up on those points, and I think we do need to, that we would need, this is actually being considered by South Cambs District Council as well, so it's a joint. So I don't know if they had any comments from their scrutiny this morning.
Sorry, I missed that. Yes, they did approve the response. They didn't have any particular comments and didn't request any particular changes. But if there are changes required, we can obviously discuss those as well with Councillor Hawkins at South Cambridgeshire and look at whether there are any minor amendments to the response.
Yes, well, I think we need to be discussing the emphasis on supporting people who are not online from our previous discussion. So I think actually highlight on our previous item. So I think we can also go back on that and reiterate that. And yes, I think I'm happy to focus on the funding and being more robust about that.
Can I just come back on the 30-month thing? Not that I don't trust the current government, but I'm always a bit loath when we go, we assume it will come under NPPF and it won't be legislative. I suppose what I'm saying is I would like us to just raise concerns that, for example, is there a way of asking for an extension with a valid reason, for example? Because my concern is if we don't raise it now, and then they do decide to make it kind of legislative and not in NPPF, so it does have legal issues. I just kind of would rather we flag it now, even if, as you say, they come back and say, no, it's not a problem, it's only going to be a guideline. Because I'm not overly confident with the current government that they wouldn't change their mind on it, shall we say. So I suppose that is my concern. It's just, again, as Councillor Davis says, we are a good local planning authority. We do things well. So I would hope that our voice, even if we maybe don't need it, we need to kind of amplify the voice of the councils who maybe aren't in such a strong position. So I think that would just be my concern about the 30 months. And I don't think we should take it for granted that it isn't something that they wouldn't enforce or make a legal requirement. And then suddenly you've got developers saying, oh, you're over time. So even if we could just highlight that in some way, or say, is there a way of extending it if we have a valid legal process going on that means we can't work on it? Just so it doesn't get lost in the next stage. But obviously, up to yourselves and the Exec Council of South Cambs.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. John, would you like to reply?
No, with the lead members' agreement, we can certainly look at that wording and agree any formal wording through that final sort of process that's part of the decision.
Yeah, I'm happy to ensure that that's asked for that clarification. And I think it does apply to the current system as well. So if if a plan is over 5 years long, you have to justify and prove that it is still, the current plan is still valid. So I am assuming it would be something similar, but it's worth highlighting that point.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. Are there any more questions? No? Okay. Well, now we'll go to the vote. Then again, the recommendations are on page 110 of the agenda pack. So if you all need to go. Okay. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. And is the Executive Councillor minded to agree the recommendation?
I am, thank you very much, and thank you for the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough, and thank you, John, for the report. And now we turn to agenda item 8A, record of decision of South Newham Neighbourhood Plan on page 143. Now, as the decision has been made, I will ask the member to note the report. So, does anybody have any comments from committee? So, does the committee note these items? Yes?
Noted.
Thank you. Now, now that concludes the Planning and Transport Scrutiny Committee. So thank you very much, everybody who took part. And the next meeting is the 9th of November, so you can add it to your calendars. Thank you.